You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into a special edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and we're coming at you live today on a Saturday afternoon, just a few minutes before the NFL wildcard weekend kicks off, to provide an early look at the matchup between the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the Ohio State Buckeyes in the national championship game. Quick reminder to please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform, or if you're watching along on YouTube, remember to subscribe to the channel there as well. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is not going to be a full-length episode, but I did want to provide basically an instant reaction to the stage that is now set, where Notre Dame is going to be going up against Ohio State in the national championship following the Buckeyes' win over the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl last night. It was a great college football game, came down to the wire. Ohio State ended up winning by 2 touchdowns, but there was a chance there late for Texas to tie it, but then Jack Sawyer, the Ohio State defensive end, made a great play on Quinn Ewers, forced the strip sack, recovered his own fumble, returned it to the house, and that was game. From that moment on, it was clear Notre Dame was going to take on Ohio State in the national championship game, and I cannot think of a more storybook ending to what has been just an unbelievable season for Notre Dame than to take on Ohio State in the national championship. Like, it almost feels like a sports movie, doesn't it? And it actually reminds me of the line from the movie Miracle, when Herb Brooks, the coach of the U.S. men's hockey team, is giving a speech to his team before they take on the Soviet Union in the Olympics. And if you haven't seen this movie, first of all, just get rid of all your plans for this weekend and make sure you go watch Miracle later tonight, because it is one of the best sports movies of all time. And it's obviously based on a true story when the United States beat the Soviet Union in the Olympics, and it's considered one of the greatest upsets, if not the biggest upset in sports history. And as he's giving his speech to his team, he says, "Great moments are born from great opportunity." And that's exactly what Notre Dame has here. A tremendous opportunity. It's going to be extremely difficult. Ohio State is the best team in the country. They have the most talent. They have looked like the best team in the country ever since the playoffs started. They dominated Tennessee. They ran Oregon out of the Rose Bowl, and they beat Texas, who was a very good team. Even though they didn't look quite as dominant in that game, that was a very impressive win for the Buckeyes. Meanwhile, Notre Dame is coming off a win against Penn State that came down to the wire. They were able to physically beat down Georgia in the game prior to that, and then they handled their business against Indiana. So what you have here is two of the biggest brands in the sport going at it on the biggest stage in the first ever edition of the national championship in the 12-team playoff. Like, if that doesn't get you riled up, I don't know what will. And even though I understand that everyone is going to be picking Ohio State, right now the line is, I believe, Ohio State minus 9.5 on FanDuel, and everyone is going to be picking the Buckeyes. I get it. They have looked like the best team. They are loaded with talent. Notre Dame, meanwhile, just continues to suffer more and more injuries at pretty much every single position, but they have continued to fight, and that's how they got to this point. And right now, they are playing excellent football. They are going to have to play their best game of the season in order to beat this Ohio State team, and it's going to be just a very big challenge, but there's just so much going into this game that is so exciting. I mean, think about the storylines that we're going to talk about over the course of the next week and a half. You've got, like I said, two of the biggest brands in the sport. You got Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame head coach, going up against his alma mater for the third time. There's revenge for the game last year where Notre Dame and Ohio State went down to the wire, and it looked like Notre Dame was finally going to beat Ohio State, but then Ohio State came back and they won on the last play of the game. Notre Dame only had 10 men on the field. It is still, to this day, one of the most gut-wrenching losses I've ever experienced as a Notre Dame fan. And we didn't know when those two teams were going to face off again. Well, it turns out just 1 year later on the biggest stage. Plus, I think it's really interesting that these are two of the best football programs in the Midwest. Historically, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, and it's Notre Dame. Those three programs have dominated Midwestern football, and now they are going to be facing each other in Atlanta in the same stadium that hosts the SEC championship. Like, if you love Midwest football, that's awesome. It's kind of like a big middle finger to the SEC, and I know that the SEC has been really just getting piled on, and I get it. I'm not the biggest SEC fan, but I do think that is sort of poetic, right? That two Midwestern teams are going to be playing in that stadium for the title, and now there's not going to be a single SEC team in the national championship for back-to-back seasons. First time that's happened since 2004. So there's just endless storylines going on in this game. We're going to talk about all of that throughout the course of the next week and a half. I'm going to break down all the different, factors in this game, keys to the game, predictions, all that stuff. We're going to scout Ohio State, but that's not really what I'm here to do today. I really just want to look at this game and think about what this means for Notre Dame. It's going to be tough. Notre Dame is going to have to play extremely well. But if you're a fan, isn't this what you want, right? You want to beat the best to be the best. You have to. And Notre Dame knocked off the SEC champion in Georgia. That was a big statement win for Notre Dame. They beat Penn State, who was in the Big Ten Conference Championship. And even though they lost to Oregon, that was a great win for Notre Dame. And still, there are some doubters out there who don't respect what Notre Dame has done this season. They look at the fact that Georgia didn't have their starting quarterback and they sort of dismiss that one. They look at Penn State and they say, well, they shouldn't have been in the Big Ten Championship anyway, and they aren't one of the best teams in the country. Well, Notre Dame handled their business against them. Well, right now, everyone in the country seemingly is in agreement that Ohio State is the best team. And the only thing that Notre Dame can do to finally get the respect that they deserve and reach the mountaintop of college football is to beat the best team. And that's exactly what they can do if they're able to knock off Ohio State. If they do that, there is nothing anyone can say. There's nothing that the haters, the doubters, nothing they can say to dispute what this team has done if they're able to beat Ohio State and win the national championship. Again, it's going to be a tremendous challenge, but I think that we as a fan base should relish in that. It's something that I've been thinking about just personally, right? I grew up in Ohio. I actually lived in the same hometown as Drew Aller, Medina, Ohio. I lived there before my family moved to Louisville when I was 10 years old. I still love all the Cleveland sports teams. I got a bunch of family and friends who love the Ohio State Buckeyes. And as you know, I love sports. I love college football the most, but I love all sports. But if you had asked me, what is your dream scenario as a sports fan? What would be the greatest thing I could ever experience as a sports fan? I would lay it out simple as this. I'd want Notre Dame to beat Ohio State in the national championship. So I'm not going to sit here and be upset that is a legitimate possibility. I might actually be able to experience my dream scenario as a fan. And I'm sure it's the dream scenario for a lot of other fans because Notre Dame and Ohio State, even though they aren't traditional rivals, it's become a bit of a rivalry in the past few years, considering these two teams have played each other a lot. They're close in proximity. There's constant recruiting battles. The fans are constantly going at it online. So this is a very heated matchup. And you think about Ohio State and their place in college football history, this is a great matchup. It might not be everyone's dream scenario, but it certainly is mine. And even though I understand that the odds are certainly stacked against Notre Dame, I'm going to appreciate the fact that this is even a possibility. It might be a slim possibility depending on who you're talking to, but Notre Dame has a chance to beat Ohio State, a team that I grew up hating. I'll just be completely honest. And it really dates back to the Fiesta Bowl game between Notre Dame and Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl with Brady Quinn, Tom Zivikowski, Jeff Samardzija going up against Troy Smith, Ted Ginn Jr., that Ohio State team, Jim Tressel, all that stuff. I said this story before on the podcast, before Notre Dame faced Ohio State that year. My family had a big, big party. There was a poker tournament going on. I think I was only 9 years old at the time. There's probably 200 people there. I think maybe 9 people were rooting for Notre Dame. Everyone else was rooting for Ohio State. Notre Dame lost a tough game in that one. And I remember, despite the fact that I was 9, all of my dad's friends, who were grown men, were talking so much trash to me after that game. And from that moment on, I hated Ohio State. And I have wanted Notre Dame to be able to beat them ever since then. And you know what? It hasn't happened. Ohio State has owned Notre Dame, right? They won in 96 and 97. They won again in that Fiesta Bowl in 2006. They won the Fiesta Bowl again after the 2015 season. And then they won in 2022 and 2023. Notre Dame has not been able to beat Ohio State. And now they're going to have another chance to do it in the biggest game of the year. I can't wait. I am so excited, and as soon as Jack Sawyer recovered that fumble, the reality of the situation hit me, and I realized, oh my God, Notre Dame is going to face Ohio State in the national championship. You literally cannot script it any better than that. The two biggest brands. I remember when I was working at ESPN, the research department there, which is second to none, they used to have this metric to try to figure out what is the biggest brand in college football. And they created this algorithm that involved away ticket sales, merchandise, all these different factors, because it's really hard to quantify, right? What is the biggest brand nationally? But every year, it was going to be some combination of Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Texas, and Michigan. Now, granted, that was Alabama under Nick Saban, maybe that's changed a little bit, but you could always find Ohio State, Notre Dame right there at the top. This is like a ratings dream for Ohio State. Not that I really care about TV ratings, but everyone who loves sports or even likes sports casually is going to be watching this game. Like, there is no bigger stage than this for Notre Dame. And if they're able to get this win and knock off Ohio State and get the revenge for what happened last year, this will go down as the greatest win in Notre Dame history. So yeah, sure, you could be down and you could look at this as, man, I don't know how Notre Dame is going to win this game. I don't know why you would take that approach, because when the opportunity presents itself, as big and as great as one presented here for Notre Dame, you got to relish in that opportunity, even if the odds are stacked against you, because this would be the greatest win in the history of the Notre Dame football program. And I cannot wait. I can't believe it's only, 9 days away. It's January 11th now. The game is going to be played on January 20th. And it's all I'm going to be thinking about, to be honest with you. I'm going to be at the game. I'm going to be in Atlanta, and it is going to be an absolute scene. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of Notre Dame fans, a ton of Ohio State fans, and I'm really just going to be counting down the seconds until that game. But that's going to do it for today. Just wanted to provide a quick early look at that matchup. On Monday, I'm going to be back with Luke Smith. We're going to break down our final thoughts on the Penn State game. We're going to put a bow on that, go over what we liked and didn't like from the Orange Bowl victory, and we'll talk about what Notre Dame needs to improve upon before they take on Ohio State. Then on Tuesday, new episode coming out every single day of the week. And then we're going to really turn the page to that Ohio State game. Going to have special guests, going to cover the game from every single possible angle to get you ready for that national championship game on January 20th. I personally cannot wait. I'm having such a great time doing this show. This has been such a fun ride, and I'm going to have plenty of stuff coming your way. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed the show today, please give the video a like if you're watching on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and I'll see you on Monday.